Next subtopic, which is America prepares for war. Had we been in any wars since the Civil War? And really at that war we were fighting each other. So we haven't had a significant combined war since when? 1812. Yeah, 1812. Well, we weren't totally unprepared. The day that the United States declared war upon Spain, we had more than 30,000 American troops ready to go. So we had trained some soldiers. We weren't, hurting. We had 30,000 American troops ready to roll. Well, where do you think the United States would be the most vulnerable? Where would you want to protect? If you declared war on Spain, what would be the state, for example, that you would want to protect? Florida, no question. So what McKinley did is he sent 17,000 of those 30,000 troops to Tampa, Florida, in case the Spanish made the move to attack from Cuba to Florida. It's only 90 miles to Key West, Florida to Cuba.
How many?
17 of the 30,000, 17,000 of the 30,000 he sent to Tampa, Florida. Well, does he have enough people to fight a war, really? So what do presidents do? They're not going to have a draft, so what did he do? He asked for volunteers, just like Lincoln had done prior to the Civil War. And the spirits and emotions were so high, guess how many men volunteered to fight? Volunteered, not drafted.
152.
Okay, how many did in the Civil War? 75,000, so many that he had to turn some back. What do you guess?
150,000.
He's close, 200,000. Can you believe that? 200,000 men volunteered. I mean, emotions were high after that ship was sunk. Do you think those 200,000 gave a rat's rear end about Cuba? No, they cared about those 260 soldiers that lost their life in the sinking of the Maine. So 200,000 people volunteered. Guess who was one of the volunteers? Theodore Roosevelt. He resigned his position as Assistant Secretary of the Navy and volunteered. And he led an American cavalry unit known as what? Rough Riders. So Theodore Roosevelt's one of these 200,000 volunteers. He resigns his probably cushy position as Assistant Secretary of the Navy. He joins, he gets a command, he gets a cavalry unit that he will lead, which will be known in history as the Rough Riders. Okay? That'll take us to our next subtopic, because we're fired up like crazy. The Spanish-American War, a summer long. That's all it took. A summer long. Yep.
What were they using for rifles at this time?
A lot of stuff that was left over from the Frontier Army, that type of thing. I suppose they had some new stuff as well. But, we hadn't prepared for a war like we would normally. So they probably manufactured some things too. That's a good question. I don't know all the answer, but I'm sure they used some of that stuff from behind. Okay? Now, whenever you have a war, you have a main objective. What was the main objective in the Philippines? To capture what part? Manila. That was the goal. The objective was to capture Manila, and once you did that, you could secure the Philippines and those naval bases. Well, the main objective for the United States military in Cuba was to capture a port city called Santiago. Santiago. It's a port city in Cuba. And that was the goal. We felt if we could capture the port city of Santiago, then we would win the war. Now, what do you think was stationed in Santiago Harbor? Spanish Atlantic Fleet. The Pacific Fleet we already wiped out in the Philippines. But the Spanish Atlantic Fleet was stationed in the Santiago Harbor.
Is this one more modern than the other one? No.
Now, the city of Santiago was different. It wasn't by the harbor, it was up on a hill for protection. And the name of the hill that burdened or held Santiago was San Juan Hill. So picture that in your mind. You've got the harbor of the port city of Santiago, obviously on sea level, but the city itself was on top of a hill known as San Juan Hill. Well, on June 24th of 1898, on June 24th of 1898, Spanish and American armies clashed. And what were they charging up? What was Theodore Roosevelt and his Rough Riders charging up? San Juan Hill to capture the port city of Santiago. So on June 24th, 1898, Spanish and American armies clashed, and along with other soldiers, Theodore Roosevelt and his Rough Riders led a charge of San Juan Hill.
So the 17,000 still sitting on Florida.
Yeah, they're protecting that area, yeah. I don't know how many exactly they had here. Well, it was a hard fight, and the Americans lost 1,500 men. But after that hard fight and the loss of those men, the hills surrounding Santiago were captured by the United States. Now, if you are fighting to protect San Juan Hill and you're a Spaniard, and you see that you're getting your butt kicked, what would be your next move to avoid capture? Head for where? The bay, and get on what? One of those ships and get the heck out of there. Okay? So, the Spaniards, seeing that the city was lost, tried to escape and get on the fleet, and they wanted to get the fleet out of the harbor too, because they didn't want to lose their ships. Well, that poor Spanish fleet was met by American fleet, led by the battleship, the USS Oregon. So the Spanish fleet that was docked in Santiago Harbor tried like crazy to get out of there when they saw that the city was going to fall. But unfortunately for them, the American Pacific Fleet was already there, led by the battleship, the USS Oregon. And about as much time as it took them to whip them in the Philippines, it took them to whip them in Cuba. And in a very short time, the American fleet sank the Spanish fleet to the bottom of the Caribbean Sea. Finally, these guys at Santiago were not pansies. It took them a week to surrender. So they fought around the hills of San Juan and fought around the city of Santiago for almost a week. And finally, they surrendered. And with the surrender, the islands of Cuba and what were free from Spanish rule? Philippines and Puerto Rico. Okay? So, during the course of just one long summer, the Spanish-American War had come to an end. It only took a summer, and we were done. So, it was not a tough task for us. No, so we just walked away and we had no spoils of war, right? We just were feeling good about ourselves. Yeah, we feel good ourselves. You know, we freed those people from Cuba. Not quite, right? So, when we talk about the spoils of war for the United States, I'm going to tell you the 4 very important things that the United States gained from their victory in the Spanish-American War. And that'll end it for today. Okay? So, 4 very important things from this victory. What was our main goal in Cuba? We did accomplish that. Freedom for the Cubans. So that's number 1. So the first important thing we gained from this victory over Spain was freedom for the Cubans from Spanish rule. That was our goal. We did that. We also gained the country of not Cuba, but Puerto Rico. Okay, we gained possession of the country of Puerto Rico. Do we still control it today? Yep. Is it a state? It's a territory. We've never brought into the Union, which kind of amazes me. But we have not. But we do still possess the country of Puerto Rico. We also gained possession of an island in the Philippines called Guam. Okay? And you'll hear more about Guam when we get into World War II. Very important naval base in the Philippines. So we also gained possession, number 3, of the island of Guam, which is located in the Pacific Ocean. And what else do we get, obviously? The rest of the Philippine Islands. Now, we weren't jerks about it. After the Spanish-American War, although we had control of the Philippine Islands, we did give Spain $20 million in return. So we didn't just rip them off, so to speak. Because that really wasn't part of the bargain, was it? I mean, we were really looking for Cuba, right? We declared war on them because we were mad about the treatment of people in Cuba. Theodore Roosevelt had the foresight to say, hey, let's go over to the Philippines and get that too. But we're not gonna, treat them terribly. We're gonna give Spain $20 million. Now, here's the interesting thing about this. John Hay was the Secretary of State during this time, Secretary of State. And when he was there and helped negotiate the spoils of war, he referred to the Spanish-American War as that splendid little war. Why would he refer to war in which 1,500 men were killed, approximately, as a splendid little war?
It was short and
We gained a ton from it. Yeah, it was a splendid little war. What did we get? We got the freedom for Cubans, we got Puerto Rico, we got a very important island in Guam, and we got the rest of the Philippines for 20 million. It was a hell of a deal. So he referred to our victory in the Spanish-American War as that splendid little war. Now let me tell you where we're going tomorrow. We're going to talk about the election of 1900. We're going to give you a profile on President William McKinley. We're going to talk about his assassination. We're going to talk about Theodore Roosevelt taking over the presidency and his political career afterwards, and his life and his death. And we'll be done. We'll have a review on Monday, and we'll have a test on Tuesday, and we'll have a field study to the Dewar residents on Wednesday. Field study. Now, when you guys get to ask about that, remember how important this field study is. We've talked about it all year.
Oh, yeah.